colon and medieval Bengal. And we know to us to listen
Professor
to
Ray,
Professor.
I hope I am audible. Introduction to me. I think I don't visit close to my home also. In Guru 50%. First, I had to because because and there was the power. Therefore, to connect. Professor Durga Basu and especially Dr. Mon. Is it visible?
Yes, sir, it is visible.
Okay. My paper is urbanisms, multi-regard to the settlement archaeology of early and medieval. We are working in northwestern part of Bangladesh, as has been mentioned by Professor Ray. For the last 20 years, urban site. I hear he was experience for me also. Visit several sites from Uttar Pradesh, sites and landscapes. Yet, the problem, what we are facing in our context of Bengal and also some part of eastern of Bihar is established in the discourse of urbanism in South Asia are not relatable in many aspects. Many settlements in survey for several survey, the settlements that we're identifying are also not fixed sources. That is another aspects of our problem. So we have several questions regarding characteristics in urban from the other settlements. For example, Niharanjan Ray in 1978, rural and the urban, especially in the context of South Asia, where rural is identified kind of pure or sacred from any kind of pollution. And at the same time, the textual sources like in most of the literature of urbanism, or some of the text early period, especially Gupta period, some prescriptive text, textual description, pompous, luxury as something impure. So, according to him, the religious and literary in. And another important thing to note is that our understanding of urbanism in history and in the historical period is mostly based on the literary sources, epigraphic sources. For example, I can mention a very interesting book by Shonali Kaul on imaginary urban centers or texts. And those descriptions do not necessarily fit with the archaeological findings of many centers which are identified as urban. I think another important thing which I will come later, that this a slide to acknowledge some of my teams and persons who are helping us and assisting us or supporting us for our Bangladesh. And uh, by Jason Hawks, who has pointed out about the limitations of urban centers. He has several early period or what is known as early historical period, and also in the early medieval period. Firstly, he has that in the excavations which have been conducted in most of the popularly known as urbanism, is mostly very smaller. And secondly, when this strategy, the understanding of archaeological strategy about old Wheelerian method is of course still very method can also be applied with much and intensive analysis, which there is a good excavation in Balupuri, I think Malda district, and the book is published by Primus, and you all know, and Shuno Bandopadhyay from Calcutta University. A very good example of the incentive and detailed application of Wheelerian method. Still, in most of the sites which are known as urban centers or which is known from the textual sources like epics, like other sources are excavated on a stratigraphy. Later levels were not consulted, and that is also an addition to the proposition of third urbanization against the notion of regarding the urban revolution. And this thesis of urban revolution is still and still sometimes unquestioned, especially in South Asia. But if we consider some of the recent works, for example, I have just put one of my very favorite book, which I have read recently, and it is a very popular and controversial book indeed, by David Graeber and David Wengrow, The Dawn of Everything, A New History of Humanity. Here, they have shown that some of the things that are very well established or taken for granted in the long history of modernity since last 100 years and more than 100 years can be questioned on the basis of many new archaeological finds or on the basis of reinterpretation of archaeological finds. And it is interesting to point out that in South Asia or in Indian subcontinent, our focus is mostly on the Harappan civilization or the period which is mentioned or identified as the first urbanism. And still, if we consider the Harappan civilization, I am not an expert on Harappan civilization. Bonanidhi is here. She is working in that region also. But I am familiar with some of the publications and some of the debates regarding the Harappan civilization. And here is also, there is questions about the imposed homogeneity or imposed standardization of urbanity over a very just India and Pakistan. And book, I was just reading Mark Kenwait's book about Useki's interpretations and debate regarding whether the Harappan urbanity was a homogeneous one, whether there was a complex society in all the parts of the Harappan cities, whether Harappan urbanity was can be generalized on the basis of some particular material culture, even whether in the Harappan urban centers there was some kind of social stratification which can be reflected in the material culture. And some of the archaeologists have just pointed out that there is no such differentiation between the material culture in the citadel areas of the Harappan urban centers and the lower towns or the outside the citadel areas. And there are many more interesting. Just yesterday, I was reading another very interesting paper on archaeology of Hinduism by Namita Sugandhi. He was also mentioning this notion of, for example, this fire altar, which has been connected with the Vedic sacrifices and fire altars. So many new data are coming. And in this David Graeber's and David Wengrow's book, one of the fundamental things is that they have departed from the notion of which was developed and popularized and established by Gordon Child. That is, Gordon Child thesis an evolutionary framework, where we think of human society, where urbanity illustrates the civilization and the earlier Paleolithic and so on. So it's a basically basis of which urbanism was founded. In fact, that is what the last two Egyptian region or in Mesoamerican region by many scholars. And they have first not necessarily on the others, also those who have been identified as the neighborhood region or the hinterland, the heterogeneity among the urban centers. And they have shown that peak standards provided by the Gordon child, which can be identified archaeologically as the markers of urbanism. For example, you all know the presence of the fortification wall, the presence of monumental architecture, the size of the settlement, which is considered as larger than the other settlements, non-urban or rural settlements, material culture illustrating social and so on. So Gordon Child's thesis and is sometimes reversed and in places it was completely abandoned. In Mesopotamian region, in Mesopotamian region, in Egyptian region, and Chinese territory also in other parts of the world. So growing the heterogeneity of here we are noticing a considerable variability and heterogeneity in landscape, in history of human society and culture, in different kinds of perspectives of archaeologists and historians. So if we think about, for example, as then we have first think about the fundamental regarding this concept urban in South Asia, which is of course still dominated by the Gordon child, still dominated or markets of urban centers. And here is also there are considerable variability, and the variability is of course controlled also by the use of the textual sources, which has become the standards. And archaeological data from excavation or surveys. Surveys are of course very few. For example, we can talk about the work of Edosi, and I was just listening to Paulomi's lecture, and two of my friends, Jason Hawks and Colin Lofro, they have also published very interesting papers on surveying and chronology of different settlements in the Vidarbha region of Maharashtra. So we are getting new data from the southern part of the Vindhyan region, of the South Deccan region, and still in the hub of second urbanism, which is the Ganges Jamuna Doab, we are not noticing that kind of work which was initiated by Edosi, and later we are not finding any such work which will just focus on the archaeological aspects with the aid of recent methodologies of surveying and recent methodologies of excavations. In that sense, we cannot talk about the heterogeneity or standards of urbanism in that part. But in Bengal, with the aid of some of our recent works, particularly we can mention Mahasthangarh, which is of course identified as the Kundra Nagara. The French-Bangladesh joint mission is working there for the more than last 25 years. Recent works in some of the medieval sites in the southern part of Bangladesh is also very interesting. We can talk about the very good work on the medieval urban center of Gur, a report of which has been published by the Center for Archaeological Studies and Training, Kolkata. And there are other works from different parts of Bengal, and there are still some works that is missing. For example, we do not know about a systematic archaeological stratigraphy of the famous site of Chandraketugad. We know about some of the geoarchaeological work there. We do not know about the archaeological stratigraphy of Tamrolipti of Tongdup. We have very little idea about the stratigraphy of Karnashuborno and Bangar. Whatever we have, the stratigraphy from the excavation report, those stratigraphies are also problematized on the basis of the notion of periodization, which cannot be related to the archaeological notion of periodization. In that sense, we can and we must rethink on the basis of our archaeological findings, rethink the notion of urbanism and the assumed dichotomy or binary between the urban and rural in the context of Bengal. And at the same time, we have to think about our idea of fortified space, and at the same time, our taken for granted notions of accepting some of the trademark artifacts like NBPW as the marker of urbanism. For example, punch mark coins as the marker of urbanism, or some of the cultures, archaeological cultures, which are still defined on the basis of specific trademark artifact like PGW cultures. And we also emphasize in our practice mostly on the monumental remains. In that sense, the practice and the literature and our understanding of urbanism, especially during the second period of urbanism or the third period of urbanism, and if we consider the urbanism in the medieval period, that we are not thinking about different standards for different periods. Firstly, we are not thinking about different standards for different regions. So spatio-temporal heterogeneity are not considered when we talk about the archaeology of urbanism. In that sense, I would like to focus and I would like to show in my short presentation about the problems with the standards or fixed standards or the universalized standards in the context of Bengal. And I will do that in reference to some of the key concepts in archaeology. For example, the idea of space and scale in archaeology. Urban center is nothing but a space which is considered different than the other centers. Other centers or other settlements in the vicinity. So what are the standards or characters which are applied to define an urban center from a rural center or from a non-urban center? And scale is also very important because if we consider the landscape scale or if we consider the scale in terms of a measurement, what is the scale of the influence zone or neighborhood region of an urban center? Was urban center or is urban center is the center of the entire activity area or settlements of the particular area? Or was the distribution of urban center or centers was necessarily something that controlled the hinterland zone? Or was the relationship between the other settlements in the neighborhood region of urban center determined the nature of urban center? And at the same time, we must remember that an urban space, if we do not call it a center, an urban space transforms continuously. Because, for example, in Mahasthangar or in Bangar, if we consider, where we are finding occupation or habitation from 3rd and 4th century BC to 16th, 17th century CE for more than 2,000 years. In Bangar also we are finding continuous occupation with some, we don't know about the period of abandonment or reoccupation. In that sense, and space, which are a part of human activity, different kinds of human activity are not used homogeneously through time. Specific part of the space can be changed. Specific part of the space can gain focus in particular period or for particular activity. And according to Brajudulal Chattopadhyay, who has written a very interesting article on the urban centers of Bengal, he has particularly emphasized on this differentiation or organization of space in any urban center. So, in contrary to the Childian standards, we must focus on what have been pointed out by Professor Brajudulal Chattopadhyay, that the space has to be the focus of our understanding, both historically and archaeologically, about the continuity and changes of the human occupation and their reflection in the material culture. And third thing is very, very important, which is not very emphasized, because in our practice, we mostly emphasize on the objects in our archaeological research. We do not focus on the context of the objects. So I was mentioning earlier that Jason Hawkes has pointed to the limitations of the stratigraphic understanding of most of the urban centers of the second urbanism, period of second urbanism. And I have also pointed out to the excavation report of Karnosuborno or excavation report of Bangor, where, for example, in the stratigraphic periodization on Bangor has been just mentioned. This level belongs to Maurya period. This level belongs to Gupta period. This level belongs to Pala period. Periodization in terms of dynastic chronology cannot be acceptable according to the recent standards and methods of archaeology. And fourth thing, which is very crucial for some alluvial and fluvial zone like Bengal, is the formation processes of archaeological record. In any urban center or in any other settlements, if we just consider or read the first interim report of the excavation of Mahastangad by Bangladesh France Joint Excavation Team, we'll see the specifically reuse of the soil. They were digging pits, they were using the soil. By digging, they were reusing the materials and so on. So if we just see this pattern of reuse and this pattern of transformation of the context, then our entire understanding of the space and time on the basis of material culture can be changed. This is just to show you, I have taken this map from the very popular book by Professor Upinder Singh to show the Mahajanapada period. You are very well aware of these Mahajanapadas, where specific areas like Bengal are not very present. These are some of the early historic sites or sites representing the second urbanism phase. Some of the sites from the Bengal region are not present in the map. For example, Chandraketugad, Kamruk, Mahastangad, Bangor, and Luwari Bateshwar. And these are some of the urban sites or urban settlements from the southern part, which is also been taken from Professor Upinder Singh's book. Now I come to Bengal. So in Bengal, you all know that the Bengal basin is bounded by some of the specific geological and geomorphological features. In the north, we have Himalaya. On the west, we have Chotanagpur Plateau. In the east, we have the extension of Indo-Burman ranges, and the south we have Bengal. Still, we are getting evidences from early historic period from the recent alluvial zone. In the Rar part, we are getting material culture and archaeological remains from earlier period. So that is also another interesting problem for us, because the region of Rar and the Barint terrace and the Madhupur terrace, and also some of the areas in Sylhet and Chittagong region are contemporary to the Rar region. Still, we are not getting any kind of, for example, sites or material remains earlier than the 4th, 5th century BC. Why are we not getting it? We are not sure yet. Still, there are so many rivers. You will all aware of these rivers of Bengal, and rivers are the foundation of the settlement patterns and settlement structures in this entire zone. And these rivers went through changes and transformation, and we don't have any method till now to date or chronologically just put the changes in a framework, which is a problem for us. And these are some of the sites, not necessarily urban centers, but very important sites from early historic to medieval period. And you all know about some of the sites like I think Bhitargarh, Kamtapur. Bhitargarh is a very interesting site, and which have been identified as an urban center by the excavator in Panchgarh. Dharmapalgarh is another interesting site, which is probably related to the, according to the legend, the ruler of the Pala dynasty of the Kamrup region, not the Pala dynasty of this region, of the Bengal region. And there are medieval sites also, for example, Sonargaon. There are sites like Lalmai Moinamoti, where there are epigraphic evidence, of course, about the urban centers of Devaparbata or something, some other site like Pottikhera. But archaeologically, we have not been able to find anything which correspond to to a space or to a site which can be identified as urban. For example, in Bikrampur, recent excavations have specifically exposed mostly the monumental remains of religious structures. The non-religious or other aspects of an urban space are completely absent in the archaeological excavation. The Baro Bazar and Short Gambuz Masjid is part of two of the urban centers of medieval period. And recently, Department of Archaeology of Bangladesh have excavated very interesting habitational site in Baro Bazar. And I will show some of the photos there. And Chandraketugor, Tamrolipti, Tilpi, all these are very well-known sites. And most of these sites are identified as urban centers. Still, in Bengal region, we are finding, archaeologically, we are finding heterogeneity or variability with different kinds of urban centers, even when they are contemporary to each other. The urban center of Chandraketugor is different in many ways than the urban center of Mahasthangarh, though both of them were contemporary at a period of time. Bangalore and Mahasthangarh, as we have seen, that the size of the settlement of Bangalore is so small, which cannot be put into the mold of the standard which was just proposed by Gordon Child. We have found many settlements which are larger than Mahasthangarh, the main urban center, and Bangalore. And at the same time, the medieval urban center of Gaur and its size and its monumentality is also not supportive of archaeologically because of the absence of excavation, because most of the structures are either city walls or gates or religious ones. Recently, there is a monumental remain which have been identified as some kind of palaces or something like that, but no habitational site or site which is not urban, like the excavated site of Balupur, has been found or has been gained focus or attention in the on around the Gaur or on around the Pandua, even on around the Kaunashubarna region. We of course we can find this very interesting bias in our archaeological research, that we are focusing only on some of the sites where we are getting monuments, where we are not focusing on outside this particularly assumed boundary of the urban center. Now, Department of Archaeology of Bangladesh, Kumilla region, is excavating one interesting site outside the hilly zone of Lalmai Manapati, and it is on the floodplain of Gomti. And they are finding very interesting structural remains and non-structural remains. So this is also very interesting bias in our understanding of urbanism. And I was just talking about this stratigraphy. We only talk about the vertical notion of urbanity, stratigraphy. The horizontal aspect are mostly absent in our understanding of stratigraphy, and the periodization is based either on our understanding of particular trademark artifact-oriented culture like PGW culture, NPPW culture, or in terms of some dynasties, Pala period, Gupta period, Sena period, Sultanate period, etc. But the change of the occupation in any space, whether it is urban or whether it is rural, did not really follow the changes in the dynasties. And that has been proved by many archaeological excavations in different parts of the world, or even by our excavation in northwestern part of Bangladesh, and also in the excavation of Mahasthangarh region, where different periods do not necessarily correspond to the changes in the political regime or changes in the dynasties. So the understanding of time and periods are very different than the understanding of periods and time in terms of dynastic chronology. In excavation, we must emphasize on these horizontal and vertical aspects of changes in any particular space, whether it is urban or whether it is rural, and changes of space and focus of the space. Even if we consider, for example, this is the assumed urban center of Mahasthangarh, where we can see a Google Earth image and the drawing by the French Archaeological Mission. Excavation was conducted firstly by the French mission in Eastern Rampart area here, and later in the Mazar area. The report has not yet been published, and there were some excavation in the colonial period and also in Pakistan period, but the reports are not published. And even when the reports are published, the periodization is also based on this notion of dynastic chronology, and also the emphasis has been given only on the some selective material culture like sculpture, like NBPW, like some metal objects or sculptures or Shungo terracotta plaques and so on. So according to the report, or if we consider the entire space of Mahasthangarh, the fortified area or walled space, excavation has been conducted on a very limited scale. That we must remember. So this part is characterized by a water body, and this entrance or the entrance into the fortified wall was basically assumed to be an entrance for the boats, which came from Karatwa River through the moats into this Kalidaho Sagar, which is also included within the fortified space. So there were heterogeneity in the use of that space. That is what Professor Brojudulal Chattopadhyay tried to focus on, that what was the changes in the space organization of the use of the space within and outside the urban center. within the fortified space or outside the fortified space. For example, there are archaeological remains on the north of this settlement or north of this urban center outside the fortified wall, also on the south of this fortified space. So whether those remains can be identified as urban or whether we will identify these as a non-urban. Definitely they were related. But this definition of space in terms of a particular boundary as a fixed boundary can be problematic for many other urban centers in later period and also in the contemporary period. And if we just show for example, these are some of the excavated remains of Mohastan. I am indebted to Professor Jean-François Salle and French Archaeological Mission. This is a famous and interesting way of attacking the wall that you have found, that you can find in the second interim report, which was published in just 2017 or 2016, I guess. And these are some of the weapons, iron-made weapons, and these are the ground plan of the excavation in the Majar area. The report is still not published. So, and this is some kind of proposal. I have also some kind of reservation regarding this kind of hypothetical proposal following the Arthashastra. According to the Arthashastra, there are particular mention of a fort or a city, and there are particular names of different parts, and there are some specific prescriptions regarding the formations of the or organization of the space. I am not sure whether we can follow that prescriptive text to understand the space of the urban center in the contemporary period or the later period. And this is very interesting thing. This is not real. These are all hypothetical. It was a PhD thesis by Sajid bin Doza, an architect from Bangladesh, and he tried to hypothesize and understand the spatial organization within the city and outside the city. And these are all hypothetical or conjectural drawings. And these photographs are taken from his PhD thesis. And you can see his identification of the rampart wall and the Karotwa River, his identification of the settlements within the fortified area. This is the Kalidaho Sagar I was talking about, the water body within the fortified area. And these are some of his reconstructions of the houses used by the general people within the urban area. And these are the streets, hypothetical reconstruction of the streets within the urban center of Mahastangad. And these are the hypothetical reconstruction of Vasu Vihar and some of the houses or dwellings used by the local general people. And now, if you permit me, I will just use my Google Earth to show the problems with our understanding of, for example, Mahastangad as an urban center. I think it is visible. This is Mahastangad, and we were talking about this Mahastangad. And even in the survey by Prabhash Chandra Sen in the 1930s, which was published by Barendra Research Society, there were mentions of more than 100 sites in the surrounding areas of the Mahastangad or Pundranagara. And you will also find that main focus is given on Mahastangad and the western and northern part or southern part, because this is the Korotwa River, and the entire space, which is marked by different paleo channels and abandoned beds of Korotwa River, has remained outside our focus, because we have assumed that as it is a floodplain, and it was a floodplain, the people did not build or did not construct anything there, which is completely misleading and which could be completely misleading. If we just take an example or cue from the Balupur and landscape of Balupur, and let us recall the notion of settlements at this point of our lecture. Professor Brajudulal Chattopadhyay, in his pioneering study of settlements on the basis of epigraphic studies, has pointed to that the understanding of settlements cannot be limited only to the habitational space or the bastu. A settlement is composed of different kinds of spatial segment and functional segments or components. For example, bastu or habitational area, khetro or agricultural area, cultivated area, at the same time pastur, at the same time aranya or forest, and this space, which were of course used by the inhabitants of Kunjanagara since the early historic period or since the establishment of the Mahasthan, cannot name or just for the other parts of the northwestern part of Bengal and also West Bengal also, we are not finding many archaeological evidence of rural settlements or non-urban settlements. It is mostly probably because of the formation processes, as the people lived in the perishable material built habitation, and this is of course visible even in the colonial period. The survey reports that general people who was living in the waterland duct constructions, and it is very difficult to find, or it is very difficult to preserve those materials in the climatic condition and the soil condition of our region. Still, we are getting many archaeological sites around Mahasthangarh, which have been identified by Monica L. Smith as the hinterland zone of Mahasthangarh, or neighborhood zone of Mahasthangarh, or the urban center. So the neighborhood and hinterland zone of an urban center is very important, and simultaneously very important or equally important as the urban center. At the same time, Michael Smith and Monica L. Smith and many other people who are working on the archaeology of urbanism, they have also pointed out the empty spaces where we are not getting any visible or detectable archaeological material in and outside the urban center. So these empty spaces has to be taken into consideration for understanding the transformation and changes in the urban centers. And at the same time, for Mahasthangarh, for example, there was a famous debate between Professor Dilip Kumar Chakraborty and Professor Jean-François Salle regarding the formation of the Mahasthangarh as an urban center. According to Professor Dilip Kumar Chakraborty, it is not possible to develop any urban center without the presence of any earlier center. But according to the excavation of Mahasthangarh and study of the landscape and other features of Mahasthangarh, Professor Jean-François Salle proposed that the Mahasthangarh was built or constructed as an urban center in the Mauryan period, which is identified as the period of capital city in the excavation report. In the excavation report, we are finding two periods which represent the flourishing condition of the urban or world space or world center. One is the capital city period or the Mauryan and late Mauryan or Shunga period, and another is the post 7th century. Interestingly, mostly religious structures during the late period of the flourishment. And interestingly, as we have pointed out in one of our articles also, the presence of the Gupta period, which is known as, of course, the golden age of India, South Asia, the presence of the archaeological material from Gupta periods is very rudimentary and fragmented. and it is also supported by our survey in the northern part of Mahasthangarh. So what is the definition of the hinterland zone or neighborhood zone? It is a region or an area which was identified as an urban center in medieval period or Sultanate period, which is Ghoraghat. You know that Ghora is horse, and it was famous for the trade of horses, Tibetan horses, in the Sultanate period. This Ghoraghat is 20 kilometers away from Mahasthangarh. And interestingly, we do not find any kind of fortified area as a boundary of this urban center. Rather, we are getting smaller walled settlements, which is more than 4 to 5 settlements within this area, as well as we are finding different kinds of structural mounds, which represents early medieval as well as medieval period of occupation. We have excavated in this area, Beloa, it's a settlement, and we have found a Brahmanical temple, which was later converted into a non-religious habitation site. I was pointing to the problem of periodization in terms of dynastic chronology. And here we are getting the solution or the evidence that the change of the structure or change in the settlement of Beloa, where 2 copper plate inscription was found, one of first Mohipala, another of Vigrahopala, third Vigrahopala. We are not getting any kind of changes in terms of the dynastic chronology. The period also mentioned that our notion of, for example, Buddhist settlements or Brahmanical settlements can be quite misleading, because not only in the site of Beloa, but in several other sites that we have excavated, we have found Brahmanical temples have adopted or appropriated the space which were used by Buddhist temples, and later it was used by some kind of non-religious activity. So how do we identify a particular settlement or particular area as Brahmanical and Buddhist, where throughout the time the nature of the function and nature of the use or religious identity is changing. Now I will switch back. I have taken much time to the last, I think last one I have already mentioned. These are the area I have just shown in the Google map. These are the settlements just close to Mahasthangarh, and this is also very dense settlements, and most of the settlements are larger than the urban center of Mahasthangarh. So according to the child notion, the size doesn't matter in identifying the difference between urban and non-urban. And fortification is also not necessarily represents an urban center. And I will just keep this slide, which are representing some of the key sites in northern part of the area. And we have to consider the landscape. For example, these are some of our hypothetical reconstruction of the changes in the river courses. And here we are finding many wall segments, smaller to larger. And these, if we consider Gordon-Chaldean parameters or standard, all those settlements were urban. But none of these settlements, most of the settlements were non-urban. And it is very difficult to identify them as also rural. So we have to find some terminology or some standards which can identify the feature where some features of urbanity is present and some features of rurality are. And lastly, I am getting back to this Baltic region where we are getting the southern part of Bengal. We are getting several urban centers as well as several settlements, even in the Sundarban region. And here, this is I was talking about the Khalifatabad, a town or city which was founded by, according to the legend, Shah, The Shadgambuz Masjid was center of this settlement, and this is the concentration of the settlements. This was also mentioned as an urban center, and we are not getting any kind of fortification, any kind of densely occupied space in this area, which can be dated to 14th century. And the periodization of the excavation in the educational area just shows that it is mentioned pre-Muslim, Sultanate, Mughal, and late Mughal for the popular understanding. But you can see the Sultanate period also covers three levels, or three periods. And the change of space is visible, and the use of the materials are visible also in the photographs. People are digging pits, people are taking bricks and building later period construction in different parts or different locales of a space, which is known as urban. So, in terms of our understanding, this is the composite plan of the excavated places. In terms of our understanding, in Bengal also, if we just focus our just attention not in the South Asia or Indian subcontinent, only in the Bengal region, then we will find many. Why I have referred to urbanisms, not in a singular term, in plural terms. Many different spatial characteristics of urban space, many different kinds of use and changes in that urban space. And indeed, of course, we have to add that an urban space must be understood in relation to the neighborhood region. We are focusing only on the assumed urban space. We are not focusing on the neighborhood region. And we must focus archaeologically as well as historically to the neighborhood region, and not only on the basis of the archaeological material, on the basis of the differentiation or different use of the space, which can be taken, the idea can be taken from the idea of space as has been proposed by Professor Bojidulal Chattopadhyay in his works. So, in Bengal also, we must take understanding or take our taken for granted assumptions to question the notion of urbanity and urban space. And as well as we must find or attend to the non-urban aspects of material culture, archaeology, and historical references. And that is for all. And I am thanking again the organizers for allowing me to take some time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Khadim Chen. It has been very interesting to listen to you, especially your viewpoint of looking at the urban centers and which we shall call urban and how we shall define urbanism because of the variability and the definition, which we have come a long way from Gordon Child's definition and all. And thank you very much. We are very short of time now, and I have seen Dr. Renu Thakur and Dr. Aurobindo Singh-Rai raise their hands. So if you have any question to ask to Professor Khadim Chen. Aurobindo Singh-Rai and Professor Renu Thakur. Please, Professor Renu Thakur. Professor Thakur.
Thank you very much, ma'am, for giving me this opportunity to ask a question. It's not a question, but rather it's a treat to me because I work on early medieval urbanization, and I have been confronted with all these kind of issues. That what should I write and how should I write? I have always been in dilemma because of all these problems which are there. We are writing, and actually people have written on the basis of vertical excavations and not, anything horizontally done. And we are not taking into account any epigraphic record or literary record. So there is much which is there in inscriptions, because not all the sites can be excavated. since many areas are occupied. So in that case, what do we do? That is my question, sir. Because yes, you have said rightly that when a site is excavated, you come to know of so many things. Yes, dynastic labels are not should not be given, and then you have said different use of space. But if excuse of that, we are talking of urban decay, or we are talking about phases. Now, how do we, get out of this kind of mess which is there?
Okay.
Thank you. Just a minute, Professor Shen. Aurobindo Singh Rai, Dr. Aurobindo Singh Rai, do you want to ask any question? And we have short of time. So can we combine your question with Professor Thakur's question? Aurobindo Singh Rai?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah. Ma'am.
And he can answer both the questions.
Yes. Sir, I hope, sir, you're fine now, and you will now, sir. So after a long time, sir, I have got an opportunity to listen to you again. And so I have two questions, sir. First of all, sir, you were talking about a third urbanism. And then, sir, what are the indicators except epigraphical records so that we can identify sites that this is urban site in the early medieval period? Because we don't medieval huge medieval sites in the Indian subcontinent, I think. And then, sir, my next question is parameter. So parameter may vary, sir. So of course, sir, parameter we cannot we do not use the universal parameter in different sites. So, sir, what would be the parameters, sir?
Okay, thank you. For answering two questions, I would like to go back to this Google Earth image. For example, Professor Renu has talked about these inscriptions or epigraphic record. I was talking about this epigraphic record and in several of our articles. For example, when we talk about, for example, Gupta period settlements in Bengal, most of these inscriptions are coming from the northern part of Bangladesh. Now it is in the northern part of Bangladesh. Interestingly, we are not getting any kind of archaeological material belonging to that particular period. And if we just consider the context of those inscriptions, this mostly late Gupta period inscriptions, we are getting archaeological sites which belong to much later period, that belong to early medieval period. That is another interesting problem for us. And at the same time, for example, some of the inscriptions were mobile. That is, of course, for example, Damodarpur copper plate inscription, 5 inscriptions were found together. And they talk about land grants or giving or selling land in different administrative units. So why did we get 5 inscriptions in a particular locality or in a particular just point? That is another interesting problem. And consider that 5 graphic records belongs or direct period you are talking about. Sometimes it might be misleading because according to our finding, many of these epigraphic records, mostly copper plate inscriptions, were mobile. For example, the copper plate inscriptions from Paharpur. In our research, we have found that the Gupta face in the Paharpur is completely absent, and the mention of the Jaina in the Paharpur cannot be detected or not yet been detected. So, according to my conversation with Royce Kufuru and Ardubrifi, we were thinking about, or we were talking about the mobility of some of these copper plate inscriptions from the particularly from Gupta period and also from the early medieval period. And now, if we come to the talk about the early medieval period, we are getting several inscriptions from this particular area. We have talked about Beloa. We have recently found out 2 inscriptions from the government treasury, which was discovered much earlier, Chatshal and Naudoba. The famous stone slab inscription of Silimpur has also been discovered from here. in this zone. The Biala copper-plate inscription was there. And recently, just 15 days ago, we have found another stone slab inscription, which is yet to be deciphered. So, in that sense, inscription points that definitely some kind of very important data regarding the archaeological settlements. But at the same time, it can be very misleading also for the identification and delineation of administrative unit, for the settlements in which land is being donated, from the villages from where the donor is being coming. So it is very difficult to identify, and the eulogy section is always problematic because it cannot be related to the actual reality. In that sense, we have found out, it is also in response to Aravindo, we have talked about it with him earlier, that our survey methods can be different, and it can be a good alternative to the excavation. As Professor Renu has pointed out, that we cannot excavate most of the sites. It is not possible. In that sense, recent methods of surveying can be very, very meaningful, and it can offer us very detailed data regarding the horizontal and vertical transformation and continuity of the archaeological data for the early medieval period. And for in response to Aravindo, we are talking about when we are visiting the Bhagalpur region around Champanagar, we are talking about the hinterland zone of Champanagar. And we were seeing that it is not possible to excavate Champanagar itself because most of the Champanagar is now urbanized. So what can we do? Because according to the very small scale excavation of the Champanagar, it has been suggested that there was no early medieval horizon. But around Champanagar, we have found many different sites. That Aurobindo was with me, and he was the guide, which belong to much later period. And in that sense, the entire region or the area where Champanagar and the other settlements or sites are there can be a good indicator of the nature of the settlements. Perhaps the nature of the urbanity was changed, the urban character was changed, and we have to define those changes. And it can also be applied to the, for example, Antikya, Vikramshila Vihara. And we have also visited that site. And the site catchment analysis, which is very popular among archaeologists these days, the site catchment analysis can be very interesting or important for understanding whether it is rural or whether it is urban, or whether we can think about some admixture of rural and urban or non-urban and urban. That is why we cannot fix any set of standard for identifying an urban center in terms of archaeological findings. I am not talking about the textual work. I am just talking about the archaeological finding and archaeological understanding of space and horizontal and both vertical. In that sense, in response to Professor Renu, we are following very intensive full coverage and total surveying, and we are getting some good results for understanding the medieval settlements, the nature of settlements in northern part of Bengal. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor.
Thank you very much
for your so much of illuminating with all the maps and all the descriptions and the problems about the modern and what we should call urbanization. And you are talking about this place which is, I know, which is very difficult to decipher geologically, especially stratigraphically, and dating is also not so easy. So it was really nice of you. Thank you very much. And thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Now we leave it to the organizer to continue with our young presenters.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Sen. Thank you, Ranjana ma'am. Now moving on to our third academic session. We are just lagging behind our schedule by 1 hour. So I would request all the paper presenters to stick to the time. That is, now we are not able to provide 15 minutes. Instead, we will be providing 10 minutes to the presenters, and the questions can be taken at the end, that too limited number. So I request all the chairpersons to keep a note, because we have 11 papers from starting from now. So I would invite Professor Durga Basu, former professor, Department of Archaeology, University of Calcutta, to chair the third academic session.
Thank you. Thank you, Ashmita. Now, without much delay, I would like to invite Aditya Bhattacharya. He is the research scholar, Department of History, Jadavpur University. His paper is on mapping urban spaces from the poet's perspective.
Critical studies public archaeology been working years. He's any of you are engaged in is equally important for as well as present is many urbanisms,